He smiled at his phone like it held the only warmth left in the house, and in that 1 second, I understood my marriage had been a performance the entire time. Stay until the end, because the woman cooking dinner that night was about to become the most dangerous person in the room, and she hadn't even raised her voice yet. The thermostat said 72 degrees, but the dining room felt colder than a vault. Across the table, Eric stirred the pot roast I had spent the whole afternoon making, his eyes locked on his phone, a small private smile tugging at his mouth. He wasn't with me. He was somewhere else, with someone else, and I knew it instantly. I set my fork down. The sound barely cut through the rhythm of his thumbs racing across the screen. In that frozen instant, 5 years of marriage revealed itself as an elaborate set piece. I didn't cry. I didn't ask who had earned that smile. The anger that rose in me wasn't loud or messy. It was surgical. A calm, almost clinical clarity settled over me, turning my scattered thoughts into a clean, precise plan. When Eric finally looked up, his face slid into the same tired, patient expression he always wore around me. I didn't confront him. I didn't fling my plate or demand his passcode. Instead, I let my shoulders sag and widened my eyes, manufacturing the picture of a woman barely holding it together. I stepped into the part he had written for me long ago, the sweet, scattered wife who couldn't make sense of a spreadsheet. "I'm just exhausted," I murmured, pressing my fingers to my temples like they trembled. "The shop's accounting program is acting up again. I can't follow these new tax forms, and the bank called about some kind of routing mix-up." Eric exhaled the long, condescending sigh he reserved for these moments, swallowing the bait whole. He liked playing the rescuer, the sharp corporate husband saving his simple little boutique owner wife. "Don't stress over the money stuff, Marin," he said, already drifting back to his screen. "Just focus on your dresses and trinkets. I'll handle the grown-up business this weekend. Leave the laptop on the counter." It was a flawless act of strategic helplessness. By playing fragile, I handed him the illusion that he controlled everything, which meant he'd never look twice at what I was actually doing. "Thank you," I whispered, eyes lowered. "I'm going to go lie down in the office. My head is pounding." I rose slowly, cleared my plate with deliberate, weary movements, and walked down the hallway like every step cost me something. Once inside my home office, I quietly turned the lock on the heavy door. The instant it clicked shut, the fragile wife disappeared. I opened my laptop, its pale light washing over my face. This wasn't a meltdown. This was a financial audit. Eric believed I was a passive bystander in our shared life, completely unaware that for 5 years I had run every vendor negotiation, every tax filing, every contract for my business with total precision. I logged into our banking portal and began methodically combing through every account we held together. There was no hesitation in me. I tried to dig up some flicker of grief, but all I found was clarity. My fingers moved fast. Within 3 minutes, every password on every joint and personal account had been changed. 2-factor verification was rerouted entirely to my personal phone, cutting off the shared tablet completely. I quietly transferred my boutique's operating funds into a separate, legally protected business trust at an entirely different bank. Eric thought he was holding all the leverage because I had let him believe that for years. He had no idea his access to my life was about to be revoked. My counterattack had already begun, executed in total quiet, one calculated click at a time. Understanding a betrayal means tracing it back to its foundation. Eric loved telling people we were equals, a true partnership built on mutual ambition. He repeated that story so often he had started to believe it himself. 7 years before any of this, I launched my boutique using a $25,000 loan from my mother, money that came from my father's life insurance after he passed. I treated that seed money like sacred ground and built it piece by piece from a spare bedroom into a thriving 3-location retail business. Meanwhile, Eric chased his version of a tech fantasy at a mid-tier logistics company, constantly launching half-baked startup ideas that drained money and produced nothing. I had quietly funded our entire life. I paid the property taxes on the Brooklyn brownstone he liked to introduce as our first big investment. I covered the utilities, the groceries, the insurance, every small recurring cost, while his entire paycheck disappeared into ventures that never worked. For years, I performed invisible labor just to keep our household running so he could play the confident founder in front of his friends. He genuinely believed that because my shop sold silk tops and handmade jewelry, it was a cute little side hobby for a bored housewife. He never once looked at a profit and loss statement. He never noticed that his wife's hobby was clearing 6 figures a year, while his startup bled cash with no end in sight. I had been the quiet engineer behind the entire life he showed off online. My money bought the designer furniture he lounged on. My credit history secured the loan on the car he drove. Every comfort he enjoyed had been silently financed by my labor. And now he wanted to use that same foundation to fund his way out the door. I realized then that our marriage had been a subscription, and I was the only one paying the bill. He believed love meant he collected the rewards while I absorbed every cost. But I had kept records of everything. Every transfer, every mortgage payment, every invoice I'd quietly covered sat organized in an encrypted cloud folder he didn't even know existed. I hadn't built that archive out of spite. I built it because any competent business owner keeps clean books. I was the actual owner of the life we supposedly shared. He had simply been living there assuming the bill would never come due. Staring at those financial records glowing on my screen, I felt no sympathy for him. He had taken my mother's legacy, my 7 years of effort and my silent sacrifices, and treated all of it like his personal fund. He thought he was playing chess against someone who didn't know the rules. He was about to learn he had picked a fight with the house, and the house never loses. Within 48 hours, Eric's behavior shifted from secretive to openly hostile. The condescension he usually saved for my business turned into deliberate manipulation. We sat in the kitchen on a Tuesday morning when he slid a printed spreadsheet across the counter, tapping it with his finger like it carried real authority. "We need to talk about restructuring our debt, Marin," he said, his tone dressed up in fake concern. I glanced down. It listed the outstanding liabilities from his newest failed venture, $85,000 in high-interest business loans. "My company's pivoting," he continued, sipping his coffee like none of this mattered. "Since we're partners in everything, I drew up paperwork to fold this debt into a shared equity line. It's only fair, since my future success benefits both of us." He used the word fair like a weapon disguised as logic. He was trying to chain his sinking company to my profitable one, framing it as a marital duty. If we divorced, which I now understood was exactly where he was headed, that shared debt would have cut my earnings in half. I played dumb one final time. 85,000? I don't even understand what an equity line is, Eric. Isn't that risky? He smirked, arrogance practically dripping off him. "Just sign it, Marin. Let the adults deal with the risk. You wouldn't get the tax implications anyway." Later that day, I watched him post online. "Big things coming. Surround yourself with people who match your ambition, not people who hold you back." He was already crafting his public narrative, painting himself as the visionary weighed down by a small-minded wife. I didn't respond. I didn't argue in the comments. Instead, I made a call to Diane Whitfield. At 56, Diane was a relentless, razor-sharp family law attorney known for taking apart manipulative spouses with surgical precision. When I walked into her office that afternoon, I didn't bring tears or a sob story. I brought a hard drive. "He wants me to absorb his business debt while he files for divorce," I told her, sliding the encrypted drive across her desk. "I want complete financial independence. I want my boutique protected, my mother's investment shielded, and his liabilities fully separated from my name. I refuse to be collateral in his exit plan." Diane plugged in the drive, scanning the immaculate financial records I had kept for years. She didn't hand me a tissue. She gave me a nod of genuine respect. "This isn't a divorce, Marin," she said. "This is a corporate takedown. Based on these records, we're going to build a complete framework for your financial protection. We spent the next 3 hours dismantling every vulnerability in my own life and rebuilding it into something untouchable. Eric thought he was trapping me under shared debt. He had no idea I was already laying the groundwork for his collapse. The real turning point wasn't a screaming match. It was a single inconsistency buried on page 42 of a financial disclosure. Diane and I sat in her office the following week, sorting through stacks of subpoenaed records, tracking exactly where that $85,000 debt had originated. "Look at this," she murmured, pushing a document across the table. It was an approval form for a home equity line drawn directly against the Dumbo condo, the one I had purchased entirely with profits from my boutique's second location. My eyes dropped to the signature line. There, in blue ink, was my name, except I had never signed that document. I studied the forgery. The loop in the M curved too wide. The slant was wrong. It was a convincing copy, but unmistakably fake. "He forged my signature," I said, the words tasting metallic. Diane's eyes sharpened. "You're certain?" "I'm certain. On the date this was supposedly notarized, I was in Milan meeting with fabric suppliers. I have the flight records and passport stamps to prove it." Diane leaned back, a slow, predatory smile crossing her face. "It gets worse," she said, pulling up another file. "We traced the funds from that fraudulent loan." She turned her screen toward me. The money hadn't gone toward Eric's failing company. The full amount, $120,000, had been wired straight to an LLC called Bloom & Co. Social, registered to a 28-year-old influencer named Tessa, a woman who had recently been showing up more and more in Eric's circle, the same woman who had been earning that secret smile at dinner. He hadn't just wanted a divorce. He had committed mortgage fraud, forging my signature to pull equity out of my own property in order to fund his mistress's business. This was no longer a marital dispute. It had crossed into criminal territory. Eric had handed me a weapon without realizing it. "He's looking at federal wire fraud and forgery charges," Diane said. "If we bring this to the district attorney, he's facing real prison time." I didn't break down. I didn't even flinch at the final confirmation of his affair. Marriage had been a contract, and Eric had violated every clause of it. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. It was about recovering what was mine and making sure he paid for what he'd taken. "We don't go to the DA yet," I said, my voice flat and certain. "If he's arrested now, his assets freeze and I lose any real path to recovering my money. We let him believe his plan is working. We let him bring divorce papers to the table, and then we use this evidence to take apart everything he has left." Diane nodded, recognizing exactly the kind of retaliation I was building. Eric had tried burying me in debt to fund a new life with someone else. He was about to discover the hole he'd dug was sized perfectly for himself. Everything came to a head on a rainy Thursday evening. Eric walked into the dining room wearing a brand new tailored suit, no doubt purchased with money stolen from my own equity, his posture radiating confidence he hadn't earned. He dropped a thick stack of legal paperwork onto the table with a theatrical sigh. "I think it's time we stop pretending, Marin," he said, flashing a tight, condescending smile. "I'm filing for divorce. My lawyers drew up a settlement. It's generous, actually. You keep the boutique, and we split the condo and the business debt evenly. Just sign it, and we can make this easy." I said nothing. I didn't raise my voice or ask how he could do this to us. I simply reached into my bag and pulled out a single navy folder, setting it directly on top of his paperwork. "What's that?" he asked, his smile faltering as he eyed the folder. "Accounting," I replied. "This was never revenge. It's accounting." I opened the folder. The first page I slid across the table was my flight manifest and passport scans from Milan. The second was the home equity agreement on the Dumbo condo, his clumsy forgery circled in red. All the color drained from Eric's face. His arrogance evaporated, replaced instantly by panic. "You forged my signature, Eric," I said, my voice empty of emotion. "That's a felony." He stammered, eyes darting around the room. "Marin, I was going to pay it back. The company just needed a bridge loan." "Don't," I cut him off, sliding the third document forward. It was the wire transfer confirmation to Bloom & Co. Social. You stole $120,000 of my equity to fund your girlfriend's business." He stumbled back, hitting the edge of the sideboard. "How did you even find this?" "I audited your company too," I continued, unbothered. "You owe $85,000 to creditors. Diane already activated the protective clause in my company's operating agreement, so my assets are completely shielded. That debt is entirely yours now." I pulled out the final document, the revised settlement Diane had drafted. "Here's how this ends. You'll sign over your remaining share of the brownstone to me to cover what you stole. You'll take on 100% of your business debt. You walk away from this marriage with exactly what you came in with. Nothing." "You can't do this," he shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "I'll fight you in court." I leaned forward, resting my hands flat on the table. "Diane handles family law, Eric, not criminal cases," I said calmly. "But tomorrow morning at 8, I'm personally handing this forgery evidence to the bank's fraud department. Once they confirm it, federal investigators get involved. If you sign tonight and repay what you stole, you're only dealing with the federal government. If you don't, you'll be fighting them and a wife who will legally take everything you have left. Pick your battle." He stared at the folder, then at me, and in that silence, he understood his leverage was gone. His secret was out. The money trail was undeniable. I tapped my phone, and Diane's paralegal, a licensed notary who had been waiting quietly outside, stepped into the room with her stamp ready. With shaking hands, he signed away everything. He had tried to use the law as a weapon against me, but I had built a fortress out of receipts and facts, and he had shattered himself trying to break through it. A year later, the air in Milan smelled like espresso and the first hint of autumn rain. I sat on a hotel terrace overlooking the Duomo, reviewing growth numbers for my newest store location. My business had expanded internationally, far beyond anything I once imagined for it. My assets sat locked behind trusts and legal structures no one could ever touch again. I took a sip of coffee and felt something close to peace. Meanwhile, through the usual network of mutual friends, I heard Eric was renting a small, cramped apartment in Queens, a steep fall from the brownstone he used to call his own. His company had collapsed completely under the weight of the debt he was forced to carry alone. Without my income and credit propping him up, his entire financial structure caved within months. Tessa predictably vanished the moment the stolen money ran dry, moving on to someone new with deeper pockets. Eric was broke, alone, and watching from the sidelines as the boutique he once dismissed as a cute little hobby kept growing without him. His regret wasn't something I carried anymore. It was simply the natural outcome of his own choices. I didn't feel triumphant picturing him in that small apartment. I just felt clear, like something toxic had finally been removed. He had tried to bury me, never realizing I was something meant to grow back stronger. Looking out over the rooftops and the crowded streets below, I closed my laptop and let the calm precision that carried me through the divorce finally soften into something gentler, something more human. I've learned that survival isn't about who yells the loudest when they're wronged. It's about quietly rebuilding your boundaries so high, nobody can climb over them again. For years, I believed absorbing someone else's mess was the price of loving them. I thought silence was sacrifice. But I had to forgive myself, not him, for staying as long as I did, for letting him treat my trust like something disposable. His betrayal turned out to be exactly the push I needed to become the architect of my own life, instead of a quiet investor in someone else's. I don't carry anger toward him anymore, because resentment would mean giving him space in my mind he no longer deserves. He's a closed chapter. If you're listening to this and you feel trapped in something unfair, whether it's a marriage, a friendship, or a job that quietly drains you while taking credit for your work, hear this clearly. Your ability to endure something is not an obligation to keep enduring it. You don't have to be the silent backer of someone else's collapsing life. The moment you stop accepting a story that isn't true is the moment you take your power back. Keep your records, protect your foundation, and when it's time, walk away with everything you built and your head held high, because what waits for you on the other side is worth every bit of the fight.